1, 2, 3, 4. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Yeah, Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour.
Welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. My name is Andreas Werner. I'm a record producer, songwriter, and owner of Crazy Chester Records. The theme song you just heard is performed by Wet Willie's Jimmy Hall and Funky Chester. The Crazy Chester Radio Hour is a weekly music talk podcast featuring an eclectic group of guests with musical hearts, minds, and souls. And many of the episodes will dive deep into the rich history of music mecca Muscle Shoals. My guests today are Jill Sternheimer and Alison Fensterstock. Jill Sternheimer is the Director of Public Programming at the Lincoln Center in New York City, where she's been programming two of the major summer festivals, Midsummer Night Swing and Lincoln Center Out of Doors. I met Jill when we collaborated on the Muscle Shoals show at the Lincoln Center 3 summers ago. Alison Fensterstock is a New Orleans-based music journalist and radio personality, and I met her a couple years ago through Jill. Both have an impeccable taste of music, and it was my pleasure to talk to the two of them about their work as well as our mutual love for music. Jill and Alison, thank you so much for being my guest today. Thanks for your time and being willing to talk to me. And it's always great to have you here in Nashville. So I don't necessarily have to come to New York or New Orleans to get to see you, which, by the way, I love too. Absolutely. I always kind of start in the beginning and not like where you're born, but kind of what is your earliest memory of music, or how did you get sucked in the world of music?
I think with me, I remember so much just being a really little girl and sitting in the back seat of whatever car my parents had at the time. Whether I remember my dad had an old beat up, rusted old Mustang convertible. I'm sure he got it because it was a cool convertible. And I remember we would listen to AM radio in the early 70s, and my whole family, we sang to whatever music was on. So my mom and dad both loved Motown. My father loved the blues. My mother loved everything from Tom Jones to Tony Bennett to Sam Cooke. And we would all just, all the top 40 songs, our whole family, it was the joy. I remember so much. That was the joy of my family. Music really bonded us together, and that was our language.
How about you, Alison?
I don't know. I mean, I also have the same memories of listening in the back of the car, and that this was like the top 40 of the early 80s. So this was a lot of like Springsteen and Madonna and Prince. But I have one really specific memory, or two really, and I think it was 1987. I was 10, and the movies Dirty Dancing and La Bamba both came out, and this is very embarrassing, but I went to both movies and I became obsessed with 50s and 60s rock and roll. Like, I watched the opening credits of Dirty Dancing. It's in black and white and slow motion, and they're playing Be My Baby by Ronnie Spector, and that song just like shot through my head like an arrow, and I was like, I need to hear everything like this. So,
and I feel it's not fair if we tell you how we fell in love with music. We want to know, how did you fall in love with music?
Well, honestly, I don't quite know why it happened, because my family's not very musical at all. I mean, here they love music, but it's like, as far as really knowing about music or really playing music, I didn't really have that much in my family. So the way it kind of happened, I don't know. What I know though is my uncle, he was like an insurance type of guy, but his company would always like sponsor the Montreux Jazz Festival and music related events. So he would take me there, and he loved blues and jazz, and I think that had a lot to do with it. And then some of my friends started like playing the guitar and kind of getting into bands, and I'm like, this is kind of cool. So I learned how to play the guitar, which my first guitar teacher was like all this really classically trained guy who I could not connect with. I would learn these scales and stuff, and I thought I'll learn how to play a song, and I did not get to learn that. And it almost ruined it for me for a while. I mean, he was very good at what he was doing. It just did not connect. Mm-hmm. But then I kind of was able, well, you know, I might be able to kind of learn a little bit by myself. Like a school teacher would give you little ukulele lessons and stuff like that. So I kind of still found my way in there. But so learning how to play a little bit of the blues, I think that really kind of made me go down the rabbit hole. But then that was just a casual experience, and I think it can just kind of gradually grew from there. Now with you guys, how did that transition to you actually working in and around music? How did that whole progression kind of go?
I started doing this. This is kind of a funny, crazy little story. When I was 16 years old, there was a kid in my high school that worked for the rock and roll concert promoter, and I think he played football. So when the football season was coming around, he realized he had to let go of the job. I said, I want that job. I want that job. He was the gopher, the runner for the big concert promoter.
And this was in Ohio?
This was in Cleveland. And I went in and, they interviewed me. I don't think that they had ever had a young girl do this job before. They had always had guys doing it. But they said, oh, do you have a car? I said, oh, yeah, I have a car. They said, well, do you know your way around downtown Cleveland? I said, oh, yeah, I know downtown Cleveland. Well, I did not have a car, and I had never driven in downtown Cleveland. I was from the suburbs, but I had to have this job. And, I came home and told my parents, and they could see how, I was like, there was no way anyone was going to tell me no, I couldn't have this job. My dad used to come home early from work, and he would give me his car, and after school I would go and be the runner and just go and do all the errands for the concert promoter. And he pulled me aside before my first day. He said, don't ever tell your mother that I'm telling you this, but the only way that you're going to learn to drive around in downtown Cleveland, you have to just get lost, and then you'll find your way, and you'll have confidence. So, okay, great. And that was kind of the greatest advice, And so I did that, and they were so nice to me. This was a company called Belkin Productions, and they were just the greatest people. They were so... I was just enamored of every single person that worked there. They were so cool. They were so professional, and they did they brought the magic to town every week, every week, every night of every week. It was somebody coming to Cleveland, whether it was, the Clash or Ricky Lee Jones or The Who. I got to do so many things as a 16-year-old girl that I could not believe that, it went from being on my wall and in my magazines and in my cassette player to this was my life. And it was really hard for me not to cut school every day to go and just hang out there. I just wanted to hear them talk on the phone and make deals, but they were just they were such nice people. And I think they probably just got a kick out of me too. Cause it was obvious that this was the greatest thing in my life, whatever you need me, that's fine. They would give me a bunch of posters and, okay, just distribute these. Well, I took this job so seriously. I would have a staple gun, and I would not come home until every telephone pole in downtown Cleveland was stapled with these posters. I loved it. It was great. And I was off.
Sorry.
growing up, were you always aware of like the significance of Cleveland in early rock and roll and all that, or is this something you learned later?
I wasn't really aware of it. I knew that I don't think I was totally aware of it. I think that was something that I kind of learned in hindsight. I mean, I was told that it was cool. I was told that it was important, but it didn't really resonate, and I didn't feel it and understand it until later, I think. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to ask if there was anyone that you got starstruck by as a teenager backstage, or if you just were blasé about it.
Oh, I got starstruck by everybody, but I couldn't. I had to be really cool, I mean, and that's. I'm still starstruck. I just, when it's somebody. Well, I get starstruck too. I don't know if this happens to you guys. I sometimes don't get starstruck as much by the leader of the band. I'll get starstruck by someone that like, you wrote that song. I love that song. And, and it might be somebody that could walk down the street and nobody would even realize that it was somebody, or a producer. But they're the people, the behind the scenes people that really made things happen. That's sometimes who I'm even more starstruck by. But I love that feeling of being starstruck. Mm-hmm. It's a good feeling as long as I, don't embarrass myself.
Yeah, I have like an automatic like protective feature in my brain or something where I never get starstruck when I'm doing interviews with people because they always just seem normal and you're chatting. But when I've worked on events like the Ponderosa Stomp, I'll talk to artists before that, or I'll interview them, at events, or I'll interview them for publications, and it'll be fine. And then I see them get on stage and I get extra starstruck. So I'm like, oh my God, I was just talking to that person. And I suddenly realize who they are. But on the phone with like Bonnie Raitt or Elvis Costello or someone, you're just like, hey, what was it like to write that song or whatever. It's you can put a distance there when you're just having a regular conversation, I think, about art.
Yeah. I don't know if I was ever much starstruck, but meeting B.B. King and some of those guys was very instrumental in me just becoming a musician, I think. I mean, it's just kind of, they will never remember me, but me just being in their presence for a few minutes, I don't know, it just, and you mysticize it somewhat, I'm sure, but I don't know, those are memories they're still kind of vivid. Which and now working with all those great guys up here and in Muscle Shoals, it's kind of the same. It's and it gets a little not weird but a little more complex when they become your friends, but they still remain your idols. And I mean, I've heard stories of like meeting Van Morrison, and he was like a complete on a human level, he would totally destroy that.
Oh my gosh.
But that has never really happened to me, thankfully, so far. I always felt these people could back it up on a personal level too.
Right.
Which I'm always kind of glad to find out.
Yeah, I think most people that I've met they've all been really nice and gracious and kind, and which just makes me like them even more, idolize them even more.
Yeah, and you always hear those stories like, or the advice like never meet your idols, but at least I haven't had that experience yet. It's always been good when I have.
Yeah, but, I mean, I kind of don't have any expectations. I'm not thinking that I'm going to go hang out for, I don't know, so it's just usually hi. I always want to make I always feel like if I have my 1 minute with this person, I just want them to know how much they mean to me. And I don't even know if that means anything to them, but it's just, I want to make sure that they know how much they're, influencing and touching people's lives with their gifts.
Yeah, and both of you, in many ways, are what I call tastemakers, or like your function of curating music and festivals and writing about it. You play an important role in turning other people on to music that you love, or music that touches you or somehow. How is that a conscious effort in what you do to trying to project your enthusiasm out? Because that's kind of what I'm trying to do here. I'm like, I love this person I want to, let people know about and want to turn people on to. How much is that a conscious thing in what you do?
I think you totally do that, Jill. 'Cause I've noticed since you became like the lead person on your season, the booking is really starting to look like what I think the inside of your head looks like. Because I met Jill through her series at Lincoln Center when I worked for the Ponderosa Stomp, and she worked with Bill Bragan, and she was his deputy, and you could see the transition from when she took over as the lead booker or whatever you're called, or the director.
Yeah.
And it shifted just like I had gotten to know Jill a little bit. So I got to know more what she liked, and it just started to really seem like you. And it's like stuff that you're passionate about. I don't think you ever book anything that bores you, or that you wouldn't, like, I don't know, give the album to a friend as a present or...
Yeah, no, it's a fun thing and a really cool thing. Our festival is we call it, it's a community festival, and it's also an international festival, all in one, and it's all for free. It's 3 weeks of music, and I mean, the important thing is to bring in all different kinds of communities of different kinds of people. So if I was booking 15 nights of my record collection, I think the festival would look really different than what it does look like. But it's 15 nights of music. I have to learn about different genres or meet different people that are experts in different genres. And they're going to have to tell me, oh, this would be really cool. If you want a cool Nigerian band, that's not my expertise, but I want to do something. That would be really cool. So, I meet somebody that they are an expert in Nigerian music, and we can go back and forth, and they can say, well, what about this? What I say, and you guys know what it's like when you hear music that does something to you, in 3 seconds if something touches you. It really doesn't take long. So, I have nights like that. And then I also have nights where, yes, I mean, it's like, I can't believe that this is my job, like that I get to, that was the Muscle Shoals night that we did was at Lincoln Center Out of Doors. That was so much what that was. That was like a total dream come true, just to get to work on that from, just from a concept, and then from meeting you, Andreas, to working every day. How long did it take us to put that together? 10 phone calls a day.
Yeah, but it was worth it.
Oh, it was so worth it. But that was how cool. I mean, that was really special. And then Alison, the same with you. I mean, you and I worked together when we did
the girl
group day. We did this really cool day of celebrating all the women who made the girl group sound from the 1960s, sort of like from the New York perspective. I mean, it was everybody from backup singers to songwriters it was really, really extensive and encyclopedic.
Yeah, and the part that I didn't expect to be so emotional, I think, was realizing how they're all good friends still, or so many of them, the New York-based singers, are still good friends. And they've been keeping up these friendships for it was like 50 years at that time, 40 years, like on and off. They're still hanging out, so...
In a weird way, that sort of seems like a common thread through the shows that really mean a lot to me, and that are my taste and that are in my deepest wheelhouse. It does seem like it's a group of people that still do have a relationship, like the Muscle Shoals people or the girl group people. And so I think that there is something about friendship and a collective, working together to make something. And it's, it's not about one person. It's really about the whole community of people, which I think is kind of funny because it's a community, that's what I'm trying to do there, is build communities out. And so the audience feels like they're part of the community too. So it's cool.
No, and I think that's also a thread that ran through a lot of the writing I've done in New Orleans, like why I was so drawn to stay there and focus on writing about New Orleans music, which is also, I mean, you could spend years writing about New Orleans music and not run out of stuff to write about, but it's also very community driven, and the musical culture and the heritage, like from, street level stuff like Mardi Gras Indians and second line parades up to, people like Alan Toussaint, who had a studio for years that would draw in people like Paul McCartney and LaBelle. It's very much part of the city's identity, and there's a very strong community of artists and a really powerful thread that goes all the way back to kind of the beginning of America and before, really, because Louisiana was, French and then Spanish and full of Caribbean influences, all the way up until the beginning of the 19th century. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like it's kind of the same thing. It's a very powerful sense of identity and community and something that goes really deep.
Yeah. One thing I'm really interested in is your involvement with the TV show Treme, that for 2 seasons, I guess, ran on HBO, 2 or 3 seasons anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like 2.5. I worked on it for 1 season as a music consultant.
And what I loved about that show was how much music became almost like a lead actor in it. And in that, I guess, time after Katrina, which from, just kind of an outside person, it's I guess, hard to grasp, but it had this redemptive quality to it too. So would you mind sharing a little bit how you got that job and kind of what it entailed?
I guess I'm not trying to remember how I got that job. And they had a really, really great music supervisor, Blake Lay, who was the music supervisor on The Wire for David Simon, and now he's with him again on The Deuce. And he, I guess accidentally, also had really strong family ties to New Orleans. Like his sister and his mother had lived there for a long time in the 90s. So he had this really good relationship with the producer and this really strong understanding of the city. And so he was able to do a lot of it himself, but I think he noticed that he would put out feelers in the community, the way you were talking about. He'd be like, oh, I need like a bounce rapper, or I need like a New Orleans metal band. And he would ask his contacts, and people would call me. And I think after a little while, he figured out that people were calling me, and he did call, and he was like, would you like to just be a consultant for this season? Because I knew a lot of the writers. I had a lot of co-workers from the newspaper that were writing, or just people I knew from the literary scene. And I think they really let that show follow the music, and there have been critics that said they did it a little bit too much, but I like it. It's because they really let people do full performances. They treated them like concerts. You had like professionals with a lot of respect for recording live music properly on camera, making sure it all went well, and they would let them do the whole song, which is really rare in TV. And I think it captured a lot about the city, because when you're documenting what was going on in those first years after Katrina, like everyone's emotions just got dumped on the floor of music clubs when they could. I mean, if you would go see a brass band for the first time after having been evacuated, like that feeling was so cathartic and insane, and they really captured it.
Yeah. How yourself, you write, you're on the air radio, you curate, you've done the Ponderosa Stomp for several years. To you, it's like that collection of different things. Is that what you are, or are you something, a writer, and everything else is an extension of that? Or how do you view yourself?
I don't know. I mean, I definitely started as a writer. Like I got a job as the music critic for the Alt Weekly in New Orleans after I had been going to graduate school for fiction writing. And I dropped out of that program after Katrina hit and decided that I wanted to write for newspapers. So I worked for the Alt Weekly, and I was on staff for a long time at the Daily, and I thought of myself as a writer first. But now that I'm freelance again, and like you said, kind of pulling together all these weird little culture-driven projects, I don't know. I enjoy putting on events. I really like being on the radio. So I think that maybe I'm just some kind of highly distractible dilettante.
Yeah. And the reason why I was asking you is I'm I have to say, I don't know if it's a struggle or if it's actually something real nice. But, I look at myself as a record producer, and everything else is kind of an extension of it. But it kind of goes hand in hand, because you want to be able to promote the music you work on. You want to be able to help an artist maybe write a song that needs to be recorded, or help arrange, and all. It's kind of all goes together, and then it becomes that thing that is just kind of unique, but then also a little bit of a threat of wearing too many hats. I always run into that too, where I feel like, because I need to do that, because I need to run the record label, that maybe the producing itself sometimes it's a little falls a little short. I don't know, but
then like one thing always leads to another. If you're like working on a story, maybe you meet someone that you really feel like you need to introduce to somebody else for a project, or you learn about someone that would be perfect for a different kind of context. Like, I feel like that's how it happens to me, is like everything kind of connects and you wind up doing all these different things.
I was just going to say that I think most of the people that I'm friends with that are somehow involved in music, that's our core similarity, is that we're connectors. That's how it happens. That's one of the most fun parts of all the things that we do, is connecting everything and just seeing. I don't know. It's like being a mad scientist, or just going, oh, I know this is going to work. I know these two puzzle pieces are going to fit together, and this is going to make something great.
Yeah, there's so much pleasure in like, I don't know, finding out about something and knowing that you have like the right place for it.
Yes. Yeah.
And that like if you connect these two people or these two ideas, that like something cool is going to happen.
Yeah. One thing I'm interested, and I kind of was able to kind of live through that process with you for the show we did together. Would you mind walking us a little bit through the whole kind of timeline, what it takes for you, I guess, from the idea to the night of the show? Maybe you can use the Muscle Shoals show, or any show you would like to.
Yeah, I could use the Muscle Shoals show as an example. And the one thing I will say is that every show is sort of different, because there's some shows that you just call an agent, hey, is this artist available this night? Yes, they're available. Send us an offer. And you send them an offer. They say, yes, okay, we accept your offer. And then, you do a little bit of work. Okay, this is where they're going to fly in. This is where they're going to stay at the hotel. These are their technical needs. Okay, great. And then, we don't really have a lot of contact until the night of the show. Then there's other things like Muscle Shoals that I'm not even exaggerating, Andreas. How many times a day did we talk for some of those? We talked seriously 10 times a day,
Yeah.
a couple of times. I'm trying to remember when did we start this?
It was Record Store Day, whenever that was. But I know you had that on your mind even leading
Well, I
up to that.
remember, I saw the documentary,
I was on my phone. I remember this. David Hood got in touch with me and said, hey, you got to talk to this lady. And I was in the parking lot of Grimey's record store there at the basement. And it was Record Store Day. I believe it was Record Store Day in the spring. I might be wrong about that, but
No, it's
I was
always
like
April.
outside, and we talked there on the phone. And it was like hot already, and we were talking. And I'm like, this could be something really cool.
I remember, because it just dawned on me, my friend Zach Ernst.
Yeah.
That's sort of how this whole thing. I definitely saw the documentary, and I loved the documentary. And then Zach, he's a good. Besides being, he books Antone's, and he books the Paramount down in Austin. But besides doing that, he's also a great guitar player, and he went on the road with the Waterboys. And on that tour, David Hood was on that tour playing bass. So I said, Zach, do you think that David Hood would want to bring the Muscle Shoals guys up and do a show at Lincoln Center? He's like, that sounds so cool. That would be a great idea. So I went to see the Waterboys, going, okay, this is like my one chance to make this happen. I went to see the Waterboys, and Zach had me back, and he introduced me to David. And I had met David once before because he had played, Steve Cropper did a show. So David played in that band. So, but I just said, hi, do you think that this would be good? He said, call this guy Andreas. And I was thinking, he's blowing me off. Like, he's just kind of blowing me off, and Andreas is just going to blow me off. And that's, oh well. But I'm going to call him. We'll see what happens. And then that's so not what happened. I don't know why I was thinking that. But, and then just talking to you, you were so positive. And we just started that ball rolling as soon as we started it, whether it was like, I guess it was March or April. But it took, I feel like really from March or April, we had to kind of, you build it from an idea in your head, then just kind of go, okay, who's the band going to be? Can everybody in the band? That was the first, it's like there's a million hurdles to get over. So you still don't know. The idea is so good. One person says, yes, okay, I'm starting to fall in love with this idea. And that's always a really scary thing, because I fall so in love with these ideas, and it is devastatingly heartbreaking if they don't come through. And do I protect myself emotionally, or just, I can't. I'm just not that person. I go in so wholeheartedly, and when I'm in love with something, I'm in love with something, and I can't help it. So, you just go through every little hurdle. So the first hurdle, okay, David said to call Andreas. I called Andreas. I said, do you think that the band could we get the band together? 15 minutes later, he said, yeah, the band is all... I said, what? Are you kidding me? You in 15 minutes, you got the whole...
Text.
I know. It's like, I don't know how this guy did this. But it seriously was probably one day that you got the core band together. So we knew that we had the core band. I said, okay, well, that's really cool. But now, so we just kind of built it. And, correct me if I'm not remembering something right. But we just sort of built it from that core out. So we had the core band. We said, okay, we need singers. We need, so then just slowly... It took a lot of back and forth getting the singers. We said, okay, well, we want to have some special guests. And, we thought, we kind of just went through. And it's so fun. That process going through everything is so fun. That's that fun rabbit hole to go down, is doing the research. Well, think of all the incredible records that were made in Muscle Shoals. Well, my gosh, who could we have? We could have, there's like a huge list of people. Could we have Bob Seger? And remember, we kept trying for Bob Seger. I was like, well, every day that's not a no, I'm going to keep assuming that it's a yes. And, that ended up not coming through, but that was a fun couple of weeks thinking that could have been a yes. And then thinking, oh my gosh, what about Betty Levette? That would be amazing. And then just listening to the records that she cut in Muscle Shoals, going, oh my gosh, this would be incredible if she sang this stuff. This would be so great. And she was on board, and she was so great. And, it was interesting trying to get Dan Penn and Spooner Oldham, making sure that they could both do it. We got them on board, and it just started to grow from there. Patterson Hood, it kind of grew and blossomed. And then, I don't know. So then we got everybody on board, and then I'm trying to remember, then coming up with the set list, and that's a real joy. That's something I don't get to do for most of the shows that, we're bringing in. Most of the artists, here's my set list, this is what I'm singing. Okay, that's great and fine. But we actually got, we said, oh, I would love it if they would do this song. And, you sequenced it perfectly, and, just going through everything.
And then I learned the hard way what hard curfew means too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Did you get that cut off? Did you get the sound cut?
Well,
so close.
We didn't get, but we had to last minute get a couple songs, I guess, off this list, and just kind of trying to orchestrate that to let the band know. We were kind of, I guess, running behind overall. We had timed it out pretty well, but things kind of went, Dan and all that kind of, the breaks and all that, I guess I did not quite
Well, it's really
calculate that as
hard
much
to
as I should have.
know, how long a set is, even if you can time it out, and most people, they're doing the same show every night. This one was when we do these kind of handcrafted shows, they can be much shorter than you think that they're going to be, which is for whatever crazy reason, that's usually what happens. They're just shorter than you think they're going to be. But every once in a while, they're longer. Oh no, what are we going to cut? This is terrible. But yeah, you learn the hard way. We have a really strict 10 o'clock curfew, and they will pull the plug. They don't want to, but we just can't. We can't have amplified sound after 10. So it's heartbreaking, but we got it done.
Yeah, we got it done.
We got it done.
To the minute. I mean, literally.
Yeah, that was crazy. Andreas was running around. Oh my gosh, it was so stressful that night.
Yeah.
Just cutting it, making decisions like that on the fly.
Wow.
With, the show is going on. It's like you have 1 minute to figure out what you're cutting. And
I remember writing something on a piece of paper so I could show the band from the set. We got to, we won't do this song. We're going to go to the next. And I think they all went to the right song too.
Yeah.
So.
There was no train wreck. Yeah, that was great. It was really fun.
And then what was really, I remember just after the show too, you have that build up, and it's and then you just you get into that happy zone when it's done. You're kind of relieved that it's done and you were able to pull it off, and just have that memory. You I guess me just running around, during the show. I doubt I really was able to enjoy the show itself, but the whole experience is just beautiful.
And finally you have a sense of relief, which is, you don't realize how much you need a sense of relief until after that show. But it is the biggest relief. And then just such a sense of accomplishment. Something that takes you months and months and months, and so much emotion and so much passion and so much, just you put your whole self into, and we're just two people of putting our whole selves. Think of all the musicians that were involved, and they all put their
I
whole
think
selves.
they all, had a really great experience, and your team was great. And, so that was, that's one of my, fondest memories, period. And being able to take the band there, take them out of the studio, and be able to do that in front of that many people, I think they'll all take that, with them for a long time. Absolutely. And,
Well, that means, honestly, that truly does mean everything. That means everything, because there's, some musicians, they come in, it's their gig and it's their job, and they're coming in, they're entertaining the audience, and it's a great show. Everyone goes home, everyone's happy. And then there's shows that you can tell it's special to the musicians. And I think the audience knows when it's really special to the musicians, and you're in a room, or you're just in a space that you're going, I'm in a special space tonight. This is, we're all in this together, and this feels so, I'm going to remember that show. I'm going to take that with me too. That was really a special show to me. That was great.
Yeah. And now you're at the end of the summer cycle.
Yes.
You get to relax a little bit more.
Yes.
Before you have to jump into the next year.
Yes.
And but one thing I wanted to maybe talk to both of you, but especially Alison, is since you did some of the same work for the Ponderosa Stump, and between the two of you and between those two events, there are some of the most eclectic, unique programming. With all the special shows you do, with all the artists you take, you bring back from Neverland, some of those artists who I'm sure you had a hand in getting down there. I don't know, they might have been retired or out of a public eye for a long time. What went into finding some of those people and trying to bring them back?
Well, I technically wasn't part of that part of the Ponderosa Stomp. I had a little bit of an easier job because I booked the conference. So we would have all the artists booked to perform, and then I would work with Dr. Ike and my husband Lefty and the other bookers to choose which ones would get interviewed during the day. But I did watch the whole booking process roll out, and it was usually pretty epic because it was a big group of people, like a lot of record collectors and New Orleans bar owners and fans that were on a group email, and they would just spit out fantasies. Like I remember one year, Michael Hurt, who's a writer, for Mojo, he was like, I want to find Red Simpson. Like, I want to do Hello, I'm a Truck. And then you just kind of go to the phone books and Google. I remember this year, actually, and I haven't worked for the Stomp in 2 years, but this has been something that's been cooking for a long time. They have Mary Jane Hooper. I think that was another, and she's not performing, she's doing just an interview. And that was totally go to the phone book, go to Google, see if you can find like a vestigial tale of her real name, who's someone on Twitter who you can maybe connect to, like someone that might have the phone number. It's a lot of like playing detective, and it was really thrilling to watch. I mean, because you would just have all these old music heads go through their collections and be like, God, I've always wanted to see the legendary Stardust Cowboy. Is he even still alive? Like, is he coherent? What does he do? And we have much more technology now, to track people down. I mean, I've used Facebook a lot to find disappeared artists for interviews too, like just in, working for the newspaper and stuff. I did a big project about rappers from the 90s, and I found everyone through MySpace at the time. But yeah, I think it's just a lot of, with the Stomp at least, it was a bunch of people just shouting out their wish lists and then like, doing the knocking on doors and, Googling to just see if you could find someone. And people are easier to find usually than you would think. Mm-hmm. Even if no one's heard from them for years. People are usually listed somewhere, even if you just go to the white pages.
Everybody but Bobby Gentry.
Yeah, she's the one exception, I guess.
I know. That's Alice and I talk about her all the time. That's like, that would be our dream person. I would just, even if she didn't perform, I would love to have someone interview her. I just want to hear her, and I just love her music so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And quite a few of those artists actually got a second win out of that particular performance, which is something I think is even almost more important than, just kind of that effect on these people's careers, that they were able to maybe hit the road again or make another record. Mm-hmm. Because that's kind of one thing I'm kind of, one of my goals is like, I'm around all these great, songwriters, artists, musicians, and they have so much, they're at their peak probably as far as their creativity, but not necessarily the outlet. Mm-hmm. And to create those outlets to be able to do another record or to hit the road or do a show, just kind of, I mean, there might be artists that decide not to do that, but the ones that are willing to do that and still have the chops and the creative energy and the health, that they get a chance to do that, because I just feel like that's so important, because I'm interested in Dan Penn's next album as much as I am in him, singing "I'm Your Puppet" from '66. Right. It's just like, how does the story continue? What's the next chapter? Yeah. And I'm in a fairly privileged position where these people actually are playing me the songs or playing me the demo, and I'm like, I don't want to be the only one hearing that. I want to be able to share that, because it's just so valid and great. Yeah. And a little bit of what we did with that Muscle Shoals show, and I'm sure like the girl group show and the Ponderosa Stomp show is kind of add to the catalog or add to the legacy of these artists.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a really hard business to age in. It's funny. And like you said, I feel like, you get more and more creatively fertile. I mean, you get, you're evolving intellectually the whole time, but people don't necessarily keep investing in you as you age as an artist. I mean, I think it's only a very few lucky people that are consistently have that interest.
Yeah. I think that's something that all three of us have in common I think that we all have stayed very plugged in and invested in people whose music we liked. I think that we like people from a generation or two beyond us. And I just think those are such rich relationships and rich stories to get. You know, if anybody's lucky enough to meet people from those generations, I mean, the stories are incredible. It's, you know, the history that you get, and, you know, just hearing stories of the heyday of the music business. It's, I don't know, it's such a joy.
Yeah, I agree. And what you said, it seems like unless an artist achieved a certain level in his prime or in his commercial prime, it's hard to kind of coast off of that or keep a career going. I think if you're the Rolling Stones, you know, it's a no-brainer. But if you are, you know, Mick Taylor or somebody that's just kind of, you know, not quite there, it's just considerably harder. And there's not really a commercial market for it. But I believe there are niches that are relevant for these, you know, artists to live in and to thrive in, hopefully.
Well, I guess it's the difference between being an artist and being a rock star. You know, I mean, a rock star, that's like a fantasy. And that's a one in a zillion thing. And I don't know, from not like I see and I'm that involved in anything like that, but that doesn't, I don't know that reality, I think that feels lonely. Whereas being an artist, it feels very communal, and it's, you know, it's a harder living to make maybe, but it just seems more fulfilling if you can kind of wrap your head around not wanting that one in a million thing and just say, this is my talent and this is what my talent is this is the life my talent is going to give me. It's a nice life.
Sure. And you're here in town for Americanafest, and you've been here before for Americanafest in past years. And although the podcast will be released after it, so there's no point for us to say, hey, you got to go see this show. But what are you hoping to get from Americanafest, or in the past? What's your reason of being here?
Well, I remember the first time that I came, and I was... Did you come with me the first year too, I think?
Maybe.
I think you were here the first year I came. I mean, I was totally blown away by the awards ceremony. I had no idea what I was in store for. And, you know, the house band was Buddy Miller and the McCrary sisters and Larry Campbell and just all these incredible session guys. And, you know, it's just like person after, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, it's Emmylou Harris. Oh my gosh, it's Rodney Crowell. It's Jason Isbell. It's, you know, it's just like 9 million people. And it was just person after person.
Yeah, that's always the high point. And being in the Ryman, that's so special.
And that first year, just going, what there's the one venue that has 3 different, you know, there's one club on top of
the Cannery Ballroom and the other.
Yeah. And just going to see all these, you know, was a lot of bands that I had heard of, but then just like the magic of, I've never heard of this band. Seeing St. Paul and the Broken Bones for the first time. I had never heard of them. Who is this? They're so good. People are going crazy. And it was just really a fun experience, so much so that I reached out to the people, Jed Hilly and Michelle Aquilado from the Americana Music Association, and I invited them to come to Lincoln Center. And we just did our 4th season with them this past year, and we had Bonnie Raitt, and they brought up this band that I love now, this young band called Low Cut Connie. They're so good. That was a blast to have them. We had Don Bryant opened for Bonnie Raitt, and he was fantastic, just fantastic.
He's going to be here too.
Yeah. But so it's cool, and I know that I'm sure I'll hear bands that I've never heard of. I mean, I try to come with no expectations and then just kind of keep my ear to the ground, and somebody's going to tell me, you have to go see this. And so I'm going to discover something here, because I always do.
Yeah. So even if it might not necessarily be on the forefront, you're here kind of on a business trip too. I mean, since you're kind of scouting new talent or interesting band that you might be able to book
Yeah.
for Lincoln Center.
Yes, that's cool.
Yeah. Another thing that we kind of you did a Last Waltz show.
Oh yeah.
I did a Last Waltz show in Muscle Shoals.
Oh cool.
And you guys had one in New Orleans too, kind of the one
Yeah.
that they took on the road with Don Was and Warren
I remember that
Haynes.
Oh cool.
So maybe, did you get to see that by any chance?
No, that was during Jazz Fest, right?
Yeah.
I think that was, I had gone to the Austin Psych Fest that year.
I
instead
went.
of Jazz Fest.
I saw that one.
I wish
Yeah.
I had seen it.
Yeah.
It was good.
And that was around the same time you did yours too.
That was before we did ours, but I wanted to go see what theirs was. I'm like, what's theirs going to look like? Because I was just putting ours together at that time. So I was like, all right, well, we got to see what's going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was Larry Campbell kind of involved with yours?
Yes, Larry Campbell was the band leader for ours, and he's just, oh my gosh, he's so good. He's just so great. And his wife, Teresa
Williams.
Teresa Williams. Oh, they're fantastic. So they were just so good. I mean, and then like that was a very lucky one. We just had a ton of incredible special guests. We had Lucinda Williams, we had Patty Griffin, we had Teddy Thompson. Then, oh my gosh, we had Dr. John. We had Howard Johnson, who played the original sousaphone in The Last Waltz. And who else do we have? Oh, at the last minute, Bob Weir came and did a song. I mean, that was crazy. It was just really cool. It was very fun. And I just remember Lucinda doing Ain't No Difference. Oh my gosh, it was so beautiful and heartbreaking. And it was great. Buddy Miller was great. It was an excellent night. And how about yours? What was yours like?
It was great too. My goal was to kind of shine a light on the Muscle Shoals connection of the band. Especially Levon recorded a lot in Muscle. He did 1.5 solo albums. He came down to do a lot of, session work, stuff like that. And different Muscle Shoals guys work with different members of the band. So I was like, well, I would like to do a Last Waltz where it's the greatest hits of the band, but we wanted to do some of those Muscle Shoals cuts that Levon did and get those. So we had David Hood, play on the songs he played with Levon. And I had Bones Malone, trombone player, come down, bring the original horn charts because he was in the horn section with Howard Johnson at Last Waltz.
Wow.
So we had him lead the Muscle Shoals horns. So cool. And Paulo Sola, who was one of Levon's bass players, he played on that last Grammy-winning album, Live at the Ryman, or Ramble at the Ryman. So he came and played bass, and then a lot of the guys who wrote some of the songs. So Tommy Talton had 2 of his songs cut by Levon, so he came in and sang those 2 songs. And Colin Linden came down because he lives here, and he worked with Rick, and when the band reunited, he had a song cut by them. So we got all these little, connections. So Jamie Hall came in, did a couple. They did a record together called All Night All Stars.
Oh wow, I bet that was great.
In the 90s. So that's kind of our concept. When we recorded it and we filmed it, and hopefully it's going to be a record at one point.
Oh, that'd be really cool.
And what was fun is, my job was very similar to my job at Muscle Shoals show we did together, but I ended up being the musical director too.
Wow.
And that was the trip of a lifetime as far as that, because actually being there kind of, it's one of those I'm unworthy moments because all these people are so good, and I'm just kind of,
wow,
in my mind, barely hanging in there, kind of leading the band, but somebody has to.
Right.
So it was a great experience, and
That's so cool.
I'm very happy. I thought, everybody's doing their Last Waltz tribute, and I want to make sure it's unique enough for it to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, we had not an option to, get Dr. John in or get, Garth to come in or whatever.
Yeah.
But with our limited resources, I felt we kind of did what we could to make it special, and the people down there are still talking about it. And
oh, that's so cool.
so it was mission accomplished.
Excellent.
And I checked some of the others out too, just because I wanted to make sure that as far as quality and playing goes,
Right.
ours is up there.
Yeah.
And I can honestly say it was. And big, the band we had was, the way I cast it was, that was like, to me, that was the hardest work. Find a drummer
Yeah.
that can play that.
Oh my gosh.
And that's one
yeah.
thing I think, if that doesn't work, you can't pull it off. Because either you really have to reimagine that music, or the grooves just have to be those grooves. And I think even the one that they took on the road, they were struggling with that, I think, because it's hard. I mean, Levon and Richard, when he played the drums, they had such distinctive feels.
Yeah. Yeah.
That either you really have to, and I had Liam Williams, who was the drummer and I knew he could pull it off. And I know, I mean, he put a lot of time getting it right. And a lot of those shows, you don't have the luxury. We had like 2 rehearsals with the band.
Right.
Because everybody's somewhere, and then you have to all get them in for a couple days. But it's always a challenge. But the challenge is, if you kind of rise,
It's the best.
then it's great.
It is cool.
So anyway, we've been talking for almost an hour, and I know we got some great shows to see tonight. But there's one question I would like to kind of cap this with, and it might be a hard question. I've been asking different people about the same question, and it is, what does your record collection tell about you? My wife would say that you are a hoarder, for sure, because just the sheer volume in my case is, and I can always, for me, it's easy to legitimize it because it's like, I know I learned more about record production by listening to records, by reading, finding out who played on it, who arranged it, who wrote it. So to me, that's all I can say. Well, it was my education, it needs to be there. And it is fairly eclectic, although eclectic in a sense of, I think the common thread is playing in this kind of a certain live quality.